Welcome to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast, where we seek to encourage and equip you in your walk with Christ by exploring a variety of biblical and theological topics. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to learn how you can submit a question for us to answer on the podcast. Welcome back to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. My name is Toby Baxley, and I'm joined today by Murray Van Gundy and Scott Christensen. Chris is on the road this week, and so we're going to carry on without him. And we're going to talk about the mission trip that you guys just came back from down in Mexico. You spent 5 days in Monterrey, Mexico, ministering to and with one of our church planter missionaries, supported missionaries down there, and so we heard from three of the youth on Sunday, but just want to hear from you guys, maybe a report of how things went and the challenges that you faced and what the Lord did through this trip and this group, and then I have some other questions
pertaining to that, or
pertaining to missions, separate? Maybe short-term missions in general.
Oh, okay.
Because I think this would be helpful to go beyond our own church body, but just to talk about missions in general.
That's good.
Me, you led. You led, Murray.
Murray wants to talk as little as possible. He didn't come back feeling so good.
If I talk, I don't want to, do too much of the talking. Well, I'll start. So first of all, I think I said this on Sunday, is the faithfulness of the Lord, and you have to go on something like this, and not just go on a trip like this, but then when you're the kind of the primary leader of a trip like this, there's a lot of trust involved and anxiety that comes with that. Thank you, Toby, for your sermon on anxiety. But there's just, you wake up at 3 a.m. randomly leading into this trip, and you start thinking about things. Did I get this done? Did I get this done? Was this right? Oh my gosh, what about the names? And are they going to, and things just show up. It just kind of happens every trip. It kind of comes to this head. And then you see the Lord just kind of say, okay, are you done? You can let go of the reins. I've got this. And it was just seamless. The stress of having every letter on the name correct from their passport and their passport number on the ticket, right? On all those little things. And then we get a message from the Viva Airlines in Spanish. It's an email in Spanish to me on the Friday before we're going to leave. And it looks important. I can understand. There's enough words there that I go, I think this is important, because I've been getting messages for 2 weeks from them. But it'll be like, hey, you can take this luggage, or would you guys like to try this? But it's all in Spanish. Uh-huh. So Katie knows Spanish well enough, better than I do. And so I show her on Friday midday. I said, hey, can you look at this? Tell me if this is something that is concerning. And she goes, well, she downloaded Google Translate.
Yeah.
And it was like, you need 3 copies of everybody's, every parent's ID. You need notarization letters. You need all. I'm like, when I called the travel agency, which, remember, this is a Mexican airline. We're not using a travel agent. So I call the guy, the representative from the Viva Airlines. I said, hey, is there anything else I need to do? What do I need to do? Because I get emails from you guys. Are we good? He goes, oh, you're good. So anyway, it's just super stressful. Uh-huh. But then you see the Lord. So we're literally standing in the check-in line in San Antonio Airport the morning we're going to leave, wondering if there was a couple people who didn't have some of the documents that were required, were not going to be able to go. You're standing there, and all the trips I've been on, they don't ever check certain things. You know what I mean? Like, then I think we're going to be okay. And then, boom, it was seamless all the way through.
Yeah.
Then, so that was one victory. And then you get into country and just pray that you get through customs, and it was smooth. Nobody was questioned more or stopped. So anyway, just everything. And it went that way all week long. And many of you know this or have heard this maybe, but we have 5 mission trip mottos. And the beautiful thing about these 5 mission trip mottos is they cover all the bases. So when something comes up, you can always revert back to the mottos, So one is hold your plans loosely, right? That easy. Another one is we're going there to serve, not be served. Another one is the trip is what you make it. Another one is no whining. Oh, that's a beautiful one. I mean, as soon as you get somebody who wants to, I didn't get enough sleep or whatever, no whining. And then, what's the fifth one that I'm missing, Scott?
I thought it was like Murray is the law.
Well, I'm going to add a sixth one is this is a dictatorship, not a democracy. I'm adding a sixth one for the next trip. But
that's what Scott said.
Yeah. But anyway, there's another one. But it just really, you see the Lord, and so thankful for that, and thankful for the many people who requested, hey, who's going on the trip? I want to be praying prior to us even going. Hey, and knowing they're faithful saints, many who probably listen to the podcast, who were literally praying for us every day and maybe even throughout the day. And you just see the Lord do that. He orchestrates it all and puts you in the right conversations with the right people. And he, in a place where travel can be stressful, and just the Lord shows up. It's awesome. Yeah. So that's just the overarching beauty of to see the Lord work through all that,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, one thing I can say is that I saw a different side of Murray than I ever anticipated. This kind of happy-go-lucky, just sort of easygoing pastor. Man, he is a slave driver. Oh my goodness! I mean, he's just like, like boom, boom. All right, guys, we're doing this. Just commanding every aspect of the trip, and we had like I don't know, an hour of free time.
Very little downtime.
Very little downtime. I mean, we were going from 7 a.m. till midnight almost every day. And of course it was amazing. And of course after the second night, Murray says, to the group, we have these sort of team meetings at the end of the day, and he says sleep is underrated.
Overrated.
And
it is underrated, but
it's overrated.
It's like overrated. It didn't matter if you get 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep. It didn't matter. We'll just keep going
and get home.
And we just push through it.
Home.
Yeah, Scott told me that he was teaching that conference at night on his book, but he was so tired. But he was afraid to say anything because he didn't want you to send him home.
That's right. Well, that's right, because I didn't want to complain.
I didn't make him sign a behavior agreement that says if you will fly home at your parents' expense. You will have a trip home early. I didn't make him sign that, so he could have.
You could have taken a nap. I'm going to stay back here.
The longer trips aren't as stressful as that, Scott. They're more spread out.
Yeah,
but the short, man,
5 days.
So we don't want no regrets. We don't want to go home with any regrets.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a lot was accomplished in this trip, and I have, I've done similar, not so much trips, but had similar, just open evangelism, cold call, kinds of things. Street evangelism, going to college campuses, and none of this was new to me, but I'd never had such a concentrated, day after day of that sort of thing, and and it was. Yeah, I was a little nervous, the first day that we went to the Colonia, the very poor neighborhood that we started out at, and but the response of the people, was just amazing. One of the things that really struck me is that, I don't know how many hundreds of people we probably witnessed to. It'd be interesting to sit down and count.
Try to count, yeah.
How many people we actually shared the gospel with, but I bet it's close to 100.
Yeah.
People, just one-on-one, group on group type encounters, but just the response of the people, the openness of the people to hear what we had to say. There was very little sort of pushback or adversarial kinds of responses.
I noticed that even on the college campus.
Yeah.
So I think just culturally, when we would walk up to a group on the college campus, and they're like laying in the grass.
Yeah.
You walk up to them, say, hey, and introduce yourself and say, can we ask you? They'd say, yeah. sit down, right?
Yeah.
So even in the Colonia, very, very receptive, but even the college students who weren't receptive necessarily to the gospel, but were receptive to us, which I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, there was a couple encounters where people, students would be sitting on an outdoor table. All this was outdoors, just people everywhere. This college campus had 100,000 students, from what I understand. And so just, multiple opportunities. You just sort of someone that looks like they're not really too engaged in something else, and we just go up to them and just introduce ourselves, and so in several occasions, they'd invite us and sit down at the table with them like a conversation, and a lot of it, was kind of back and forth questions. We had the EvangeCube that we used in some of those conversations. I'm talking about the college campus, and some of those. What may be necessary, but man, amazing interactions with a lot of people, and at the very least, I feel like if people were not, we don't know that anyone got saved from hearing the gospel, but it raised a lot of eyebrows. People, you could tell a number of interactions we had. People had never heard this before. They had never heard the gospel as we had presented it, especially those that have come from, and most people in Mexico come from a Catholic, Roman Catholic background. And, and so just really, and just the openness to hear what we had to say. I was struck by that. Yeah. Didn't expect that at all.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, and I love in the Colonia. So the Colonia, as you maybe heard on Sunday, is what would be considered a squatters community. And squatters community would be, they're outside of the city limits. They have no money, they have no means, and they just sit on a plot of land. And they start making their home on that land. It's land that maybe is not very useful land. It's not very good land. And then after they've done, let's say they started, I don't know when that community was started. Let's say it was 50 years ago. Then the government comes in and says, okay, well, maybe they can run some electricity through there. There's no running water. They're all outhouses. I didn't see any electricity if I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention.
There was electrical wire. A couple of houses we went in, they had TVs.
That's true. The Armando that we went and prayed for inside his home. But that's kind of what these communities are made of. And like was said on Sunday, they're made out of pallets and signs and cardboard and any kind of tin. Those would be the very meager ones with dirt floors. They're very small, maybe a family of 4, 5, 6 living in there. And you go and you see the hopeless situation that they're in. And there was a lady we talked to, Araceli, we talked to her 2 different times, 2 different days, one group and then a separate group. And the brokenness in their eyes and the receptiveness, and then the brokenness, and your mind, you go, my gosh, many of these people have lived their entire lives like this, and they're never not going to live that way. Like they're going to die, that way. It just gives you a reflection on your own life, and then what do we have in common? The only thing we have in common is the only hope we have is in Christ, and that. We would take them a small gift, a bag of dry beans, a gallon bag of dry beans, a gallon bag of dry rice, and say, we have this small gift for you that will maybe just be a few meals for you, but we have something greater. We have the gift of eternal life that we want to share with you, and like you said, Scott, very receptive to invite you in. And it's sketchy, right? Because we're not used to, like Armando, we went in and he was sick and he's coughing and you could tell, but we went in there and got to sit with them and brought our translator in and we prayed with him and shared the gospel with him. It's pretty life transforming.
So how many bags of rice and beans did y'all pass out?
We had 100 pounds of rice and 100 pounds of beans that we made into gallon-sized bags. So I don't know the number.
Yeah. Did you buy them there or did you bring them?
We bought them there.
Okay.
No, we bought them. Yeah, we bought them there. And then we we were going to go to, because we didn't, we were holding our plans loosely. We didn't know if we'd go one day to the Colonia, so we went 3 days, 3 mornings. So the third morning, we had already run out of beans and rice. So I got up early with our driver and went to the store, and we bought buckets, just like a wash bucket with a big bar of soap and a brush, because they hand wash their clothes, and took those. Those were our next gift we could give to people. And there's just some, Berenice, she had the little store there, a little candy store, and just how blessed she was that we were there, we'd been to her house twice. And some of the guys that I've talked to since the trip is over, I said, how cool would it be to go spend your entire trip in the Colonia and live in the Colonia? Like pitch a big tent, put your things over there, and have service every night, and have, you are living amongst the people. Can you imagine the impact on that community, And then if you have, like Eduardo, our connection with it was Eduardo's dad, Eduardo Sr., has done ministry in that community. So when I asked the people at the church, how many of you have been, there was a sample of the church, how many have ever been to the Colonia? The only people that raised their hands were Eduardo's family. So Eduardo, who's the church planner, his dad, who knows the people in that community, and then his 2 younger brothers, one's a doctor, and I forget what the other one does, businessman. They all went to that Colonia when they were kids because their dad would take them. Their dad would take them to that Colonia. And so Eduardo Sr., who hosted us in his compound, he's the one that said, hey, because I told him when I visited a month ago, hey, we'd love to go find a place where we could go just give a small gift to people and share the gospel. And any ministry I've done in the last 20 years of doing mission trips like this, the best ministry is going to a place like that, taking a small gift and sharing the gospel. That's amazing what comes out of that. You know? And so that was our connection, was Eduardo Sr. So we go driving, we get in Monday afternoon, Monday evening, him and I go driving through that Colonia so he can show me around. And this Eduardo Sr., he's stopping at certain points in the Colonia. And I mean, it's rough. They were talking, when we talk about how the Moses family, they live on these really bad roads, that's how the roads are. I mean, you're going 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour, right? It's brutal, and you're trying to squeeze through, and it's pallet homes, and, trash everywhere, and smells. And we're driving, and he would stop, and he would talk, in Spanish, asking somebody, and he's asking for this lady, Lourdes, that he hadn't seen in 10 years. And we're driving through this. I mean, it's the ghetto, Yeah. And we find Lourdes. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. He hadn't seen her in 10 years. We find her, and we get to go pray for her. And then she was kind of our host of our first morning there. We had a little gathering in front of her little home, and it was crazy, But Eduardo Sr. just loves the people of this Colonia. And they've had a lot of mishaps and a lot of bad pastors come through and try to plant churches there with false teachings and bad stuff. And so it'd be cool if we could have, you go there for a week, you plant yourself in there, and then the church follows up with a church planter. Right. Like a Raul, who was our driver, who loved those people, So anyway, super cool stuff.
Was that pretty eye-opening for Eduardo's church, the need there at the Colonia? Were they aware?
Because they weren't really with us. Their church wasn't, none of the church members, besides Raul, who was our driver, he was kind of he stayed with us the whole time. But he'll spread the word,
But he was deeply impacted by that.
I
mean, their church had never done anything quite like that.
Yeah.
They wanted to do some outreaches at the hospitals, a couple of the hospitals that we went to in the college campus. But yeah, he was deeply impacted by going to the Colonia.
And you did some ministry there at the hospital too, right?
Yes, the way the hospitals work, they have 3 hospitals there, and they're renowned hospitals within Mexico. They're good hospitals, so people come from all over to bring their loved ones there. So another just brokenness. Oh my gosh, one hospital, it seemed like every conversation we had, they were there because their child, 3, 4, 5-year-old child, was dying of cancer.
So it's like a St. Jude's type
type
hospital.
of thing, right? we had a conversation where they were going there to pick up the body of their son who had been burned to death. Another one whose body was badly burned because someone come and lit their house on fire with him in it. Sad story. So these hospitals, what happens? People come from all over. Well, they don't have the means to stay in a place, a hotel or anything. And so they're just staying on the campus, near the campus, under the bridge, whatever they can, waiting to hear back from the doctors or whatever it might be. So Eduardo's church has wanted to, I think they've maybe done it a couple times or want to start doing it, where they go minister to those people and bring them food and then have conversations, pray for them. And so we'd made, over the course of 2 hospitals that we visited, we made 200 sack lunches. Yeah, ham and cheese sandwiches. And initially what we thought was we would, our first afternoon of doing that, we were going to make all these sandwiches. I said, well, how many? And Eduardo said, make 100. I was like, all right, we're going to make 100. And then make one for each of us. And then we would go talk to someone and say, hey, I want to, here's a lunch. I want to eat lunch with you, and then use that as a conversation. But it didn't work out that way, where we could just sit with one-on-one and have a lunch with somebody, because there was just too many people. Yeah. So we kind of broke up into groups, and it ended up being really great, great conversations over a meal. They're eating their sandwich while we're sharing the Evangelium and translating and talking. And we were there for several hours that first day, and then we went to a second hospital the next day and did that again. And so that might be a catalyst for them to be able to do that more. Yeah.
What kind of impact does that have on our youth? I mean, just hearing those stories, that's gut wrenching.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Some are still glossed over, right? There's some, it's sure you just, maybe it's the shock of what you're seeing and doing. Some it's just, you're not mature enough in your faith yet that it's just different. Yeah. Some it just breaks, and some they're still not maybe there yet, and you just see, and that's why I love doing these, because you just see the Lord transform our young people, and they get to see and do things that many people don't ever do. And this transforms them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
This isn't a one and done, like, that was great. I mean, I can't wait to go back next year. Yeah. That's usually not the response. It's like, I have been changed. And I want to go back next year, but I want to go like when I'm out of my home and my parents aren't making me go to church and making me go to Sunday school and making me go to Bible study. Like I'm in, right? I'm in for the local church. I'm in for the ministry. I want to be used by God. I want to share the gospel. And that's the long-term fruit that I've been able to witness over the years of doing this, right? And so there's a twofold benefit. It's the people we're blessing, but also what it does to us.
Yeah. I want to get back to that. Scott, you led a conference related to your book. We mentioned it earlier. How'd that go?
Went well. Yeah, we had about 100 to 125 people each night. Members of Eduardo Izquierdo's church. It's the Bible Church of Monterrey is the English translation of the church, and they meet in a hotel, a very nice hotel, a Holiday Inn.
Yeah, really nice.
And beautiful place. And so yeah, that went well. It was a little challenging because I have done teaching with translation before, but Eduardo wanted to do the translation simultaneous to my speaking, which was challenging because basically they set me up with a mic. He would sit in a back room behind the auditorium, and so my mic would feed into his. He probably had a set of headphones, and then he just translating simultaneous to me speaking. But so I'm speaking, you can sort of hear me, but I'm not mic'd to the audience. So what they're hearing mainly is his voice coming through the loudspeakers in Spanish.
It's like, real quick, so it's like those, remember the Japanese karate movies you'd watch? Yeah. Their mouth is going, but different words are coming out. So that's Scott. So Scott's mouth is going, but Spanish is coming out of the speakers, which is different, right? That's what I did when I was there last time, and it was awkward.
Yeah, it's distracting for you to keep your thoughts going. Yeah. Because, and so I had to pause at times to do that and kind of collect my thoughts. I mean, I'm glad that I had a very careful set of notes that I was working from, so I could just keep track that way. But no, we got good responses from people. Had a number of conversations, mostly with more English speaking individuals, because didn't have didn't have a lot of conversations with just purely Spanish speaking folks. But yeah, it seemed to go really well. Eduardo was very pleased with how it all went. It's hard for me to judge, especially in that setting. How did this go? But he seemed very pleased with it, and the conversations I had with people afterwards were very, very encouraging. And so yeah, we were able to give out books.
Share the faithfulness of God. In those when those books arrived. So you ordered those books and had them sent 3 weeks prior to the trip.
They had been those books were ordered over a month ago, and they had been sitting in customs for weeks and weeks, and there's still questions as to why that was. One box of books showed up on Wednesday, the first day of the conference, but Eduardo was like, I don't really want to give these out because it's not enough for all the conference attendees. And so we just kept praying, Lord, praying, so the next day and several more boxes showed up, and they had enough to distribute to all the conference attendees. And we ordered enough for the whole church. And so those, I don't know if those have come in yet, but yeah, it was amazing that the Lord answered that prayer, because they've been sitting in customs for weeks and weeks, and nobody is really quite sure why.
But they literally showed up.
Yeah.
Both days of the conference.
Right on
which
time.
is unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's just, that's the Lord, right? Literally they showed up, and you were gonna, excuse me, you were gonna do the conference anyway.
Right.
But for them to have the gift that our church bought those books.
Well, and I was able to refer to pages on the books because there's a number of diagrams, that were kind of important to the, the presentation. And so people are flipping to their pages, on that second night. Awesome. And I didn't need them on the first night. So it's interesting that all the diagrams were on the second night.
That's awesome.
And so everybody had the book, and they could flip to those pages.
Obviously we don't have the perspective to know really what the Lord's going to do with this in the long term. But what was the highlight of the trip for you guys?
Go ahead, Scott, and then I'll.
One of there were so many, it's hard to identify what was the best highlight. Two come to mind. One was the first day that we were in the Colonia, and we were with the lady, what's her name again? Lou, I can't remember. Lourdes, yeah. Yes. And we had kind of set, we sent our various teams to different parts of the neighborhood to evangelize. And then we were inviting people to come and meet at a particular time in front of her home. And everybody knew who she was. She's almost like
they
she's
called
kind
her
of
mommy.
Yeah, like she's sort of the matriarch of the community or something. And so it was just fascinating to me to just see these people slowly merging, from various parts of the neighborhood, just walking and coming together until we had a pretty good sized group of our team, and then just various, little kids, men, women, old, young, and they were all just gathered together, and we're all just kind of hanging out, having conversation. And then finally, we presented the EvangeCube. One of our team members did that, and people's attention were just rapt. And what it reminded me of, I was sitting there observing and thinking, this must have been what it was like when Jesus entered a village, during his ministry. I mean, I can imagine a similar setting, very poor community, just ramshackle homes, but as he shows up into the village with his disciples, and people just start, coming out of the woodwork and just gathering into a crowd, and then he would preach, and then he would heal people, probably pray for people. And that's what we did. We presented the gospel, and then we start praying for people. One lady in particular that was just tears pouring out of her.
Wrecked, yeah.
And we prayed for her, and then a couple of us went into her home and prayed for her husband, who had a dislocated shoulder. He had dislocated his shoulder like 6 years ago, and it's never been fixed. They've never been able
he's
to
probably
afford.
70 years old.
Yeah, and so he pulled his shirt down and showed his bones sticking up out of his shoulder, and you're just like, oh, you've got to be kidding. And he's lived that way for 6 years and totally dislocated shoulder. And so we prayed for him, prayed for her, and they were just in tears. They showed us a Bible that they read from every day. And then they gave us a gift of, some kind of a baked good that they had made, just to show their gratitude toward us. And yeah, that was very moving. So that experience was one that was powerful. The other one was a conversation. It was the last conversation that we had. It was a group of us on the campus at the university where we spoke with these 4 men, probably the longest conversation we had. 4 college guys. They looked like frat boys, and they probably were, but they were all Roman Catholic and to various degrees. And, big husky looking dudes, kind of like
athletic
athletic. Like, yeah, you probably don't want to mess with these guys, if you got in a scrap or something, But they invited us to sit down at their table, and we had this back and forth conversation about what they believed and what we believed. And we were able to present the gospel and ask a lot of questions. And they were all kind of, at the beginning, they were real sort of, almost like, who are you people? And they were friendly enough, but just, they were kind of laughing and joking and, kind of like, this is fun. This is interesting having this conversation with these Americans. But by the end of the time, there was a soberness
That's good.
in all 4 of them as we were sharing the gospel and sharing it with earnestness. Sebastian, one of the young men from El Paso, was Sebastian's a very intense guy, but he and I and a couple of the others were just sharing very earnestly, our concern for their souls. And we said, and we asked them, are you concerned about your eternal destiny? Because they said they believe in heaven and hell. And I said to them, are you concerned that you might die and go to hell? And they're like, yes, and it was a very sobering, it wasn't just a kind of a nonchalant, response. I mean, there was a soberness in their responses to our questions. And, at the very least, we left something for them to really think about. And yeah, very, very interesting. So those are 2 of my highlights. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'd say just overall highlight is the team, the group. To see the group come together. We do some mission training, so you can see the group start to unify through some mission trainings, and we practice evangelism with each other. The EvangeCube was our means that we were using. It was our main tool. And sharing our testimonies with one another. So you start to see the group kind of come together and starting out, kind of know who's a little bit more on the outside. And then you get on the trip and there's the excitement and the emotion that goes with that. But then you start to see one of the things when, we did a lot of driving because to get anywhere took an hour and a half. Traffic is so bad. And so you hear and then some of the conversations, I'm not necessarily happy with the type of conversations, but the kids, because they take their phones away. As soon as we get into the country, okay, give us your cell phones. Nobody argues with that. Like many of the ones who have been on trips for like, man, I want you to take our phones away. You know what I mean? Yeah. I wouldn't do it on my own, but I want you to take them away, And so they have to talk, and they just non-stop, hours on end, just yakking it up, right, Scott? Non-stop.
Yeah.
And they just love each other, And so the kids who are more shy, more introverted, observing this and what the Lord's doing in their lives. And so that, I love that, the unity of the team. And then just for me, the highlight is what's going to happen now. It's always that. It's always like, what fruit is going to happen in our students' lives, and how has this changed them? And only time will tell, right? Only time will tell in the way that they treat their parents, way that they treat each other, way that they act at school, way that they view the church, the way that they come to church, the way they pay attention during sermons, the way, only time will tell. And it's not perfect. It's not like, oh, you went on mission trip, you should be doing that. No, but you just see the Lord working in their life. So, it goes back to, I say over and over, equipping the saints to do ministry. So this is just an aspect of that. And that's what motivates me to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. The getting to do it, because I love, my heart breaks when I go to those colonias. I get choked up just talking about it, which is one highlight for me, because I'm like, thank you, Lord, that I don't have a hard heart, like that you keep it broken and soft and supple for people who are hurting and broken. But it's what we do when we come home. It's how this changes the way our students are for the long run. So that's my highlight,
Seems to me one of the great lessons of this, and the encouraging thing is, because of the way Murray so emphasizes everyone participating in sharing the gospel. No one is going to go on these trips and not share the gospel. And that's part of Murray's training throughout, leading up to the trip. And, I sometimes I've been skeptical of these types of, street evangelism kinds of ventures. But one thing I have to say is that, number one, I was very impressed, Murray, with you and how you did the trainings and how you got everyone to practice sharing the gospel, sharing their testimonies, getting comfortable with doing that before we even go on the trip, and showing them, what they need to do, scriptures they need to memorize and, and have. And I think the long-term benefit of that is that you create an evangelistic environment, or create an evangelistic impulse, in those young people, that hopefully as they move on in their lives, they will not be afraid to share the gospel.
Right. And they'll be equipped.
They'll be equipped.
That's right.
And the more I keep thinking about this, the more I'm thinking, every Christian, every member of the church should have these kinds of experiences. Yeah. They should go through this kind of training. And I think we should look for opportunities. It's not like we have to do this every week, but sure. I mean, look for opportunities where we could train just, even adults. It's been a while since I've done, just street evangelism, and it was a little scary at first, a little nerve wracking. But man, once you start doing it, and each time it gets easier, and you begin to learn from how you interacted before and made some mistakes, and it's like you get more and more comfortable with it, and it creates a comfort level where, you're not going to be afraid to have encounters with whoever in the course of your life, your neighbor, your coworkers, your family members, to be able to generate conversations and talk about the gospel. I think very few Christians share their personal faith and do personal evangelism, unless it's, super close friend or something like that. Yeah. Certainly not with strangers. And I think it's something that the church neglects. Yeah. And Murray, I know you have a lot of thoughts on all that, but
yeah. Well, even like our last training, we had us we practiced our evangelism or evangecube with each other in pairs, and then just kind of open up who wants to come up and kind of share with the whole group, right? And a student came up. He's a very smart kid. And he just fumbled through it, right? It just didn't have the verses right, wasn't even close. And there was a rebuke. Like I stopped, right? And then there was a rebuke. And then from that point on, right, we're driving to the airport in our van, and all they're doing is going over the verses.
Yes.
So every picture of the cube had a verse you needed to memorize associated with it, because we said, listen, the one thing we're going to do is we are going to preach the word of God, because it does not return void. So every picture has a verse that you need to know, that you're going to say, the Bible says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and explain what that means. The Bible says, Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes, even though he dies, will live, and these verses, and they were practicing, and every student, when we actually did it in real time, they had their, it was great, right?
Yeah.
And they'll have those are so imprinted now in their minds. I said, you should be able to preach the Evangicube without the Evangicube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could just use those verses and tell the story of the gospel with these verses, and so I thought it was great. I thought, man, super proud of everybody, proud of the team, proud of Scott and Linda and Sierra as leaders, and there was no complaining. Just one night there was when somebody said, what time is it? Because nobody knows what time except us who have our phone.
Yeah.
I said, it's midnight, and someone almost started to complain. That's when we said, hey, sleep is overrated. There's time to sleep in heaven, if there's sleep in heaven. No complaining. Everybody really, I think, just participated, did a great job, and it was overall, I think, a very fruitful trip. So,
how special was it for you guys to have your own kids on this trip? Like, because Quinn and Matthew were on it.
Yeah, that's always a highlight to get to take Quinn. When Chris asked me before the trip, he said, "What are you most looking forward to?" I said, "Hopefully, the impact it makes on our students." And the fruit from that, and then getting to go with my son, they're only got him one more year. So
it was a great experience. And Matthew and I have had multiple conversations in the wake of, because, Matthew and I also went to the Shepherds Conference together, and it was his first time together at the Shepherds Conference. And that was the week before. And so we've had conversations about that. We've had conversations about the Mexico trip, and they're just ongoing. Every time we're together, we're talking about something new related to it. And God's really shaping Matthew's life. And there was some emotional ups and downs for him on this trip that were difficult for him to process. But I can see the Lord working in his life and shaping him for whatever the Lord has for his future, which he feels very called to ministry, and we'll see how all that shapes out in his life.
Yeah. Short-term mission trips often get they have a bad rap. It's almost what they call missio tourism, or I can't remember the other words. That there's stories about youth groups going to Mexico and painting the same house every year. But where did your missions philosophy come from, and your really philosophy of youth ministry?
So when I first, in 22 years ago, really believed God called me into ministry, maybe 23 years ago, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't even know. I had no context. I just knew the Lord called me into ministry, and I didn't even know what that meant. I couldn't have said, hey, the Lord just called me into ministry. It took time to realize that's what the Lord had done. And so I was at a great church, Coronado Baptist Church, that I talk about all the time, processing that. And then my first ministry experience was on staff with Young Life, which there's still a lot of good things that I got out of that, but I knew that that's not what the Lord had called me to. The Lord had called me to the local church. Pastor Mike would tell me that all the time, parachurch ministries will come and go, but the local church will be here forever. And so I knew that. And so when I got out of Young Life and was a youth pastor at a Methodist church, I was from the Baptist church, so don't shoot me. I was from the Baptist church, but really was sent, if you will, from the Baptist church to start a youth ministry at this really big Methodist church. And I didn't know. I'm like, am I just going to do Young Life at the church? I didn't understand. And the guy who was the youth and missions pastor at Coronado Baptist had been doing it a long time. He said, just follow me. Well, we'll meet once a week, and I'll tell you what we do, how we do it, why we do it. I'm like, all right. And I bought in. It was easy to buy in because I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. Like, we're not a youth group. We're a youth ministry. We're not going to entertain kids. You can't entertain kids. Don't try to entertain kids. How are you going to out entertain what they can get from the world?
Right.
Like, if we're going to have a movie night, they're going to go watch whatever they're going to watch at the theater. I mean, what are we going to watch? Bambi, and whatever, so, you can't, so don't even try. And then adopting a mission philosophy. He said, you got to go on a mission trip every year. Things culminate around that mission trip and what happens and all that. And I had a little bit different generational disciple making than he thought of, but the overall ministry philosophy and doing short-term missions was from him. And then a few years later, he was leaving to go into him and his wife to go in the mission field full time. And that's when I got hired to be the youth and missions pastor at Coronado Baptist Church. And the only reason I would kept doing it was every year, I've said this, every year that we would graduate 20 to 25 high school students, and we'd have graduation Sunday. They would stand up and, what are you doing? We would have, instead of the national statistic of 70 to 90% of kids stop going to church when they go to college, that statistic was flopped over. 70 to 90% were like going in. We would have 4 or 5 people take a gap year to go into missions. They already got accepted to college, but they'd do a gap year for missions. 4 or 5, like every year. We'd have another 10, like they're immediately getting involved in their college ministry, where they're going to go, their college ministry. Like, where do I sign up? They're not like having to have their parents say, be sure you go find a good church. And, or the typical student who graduates high school, typical and statistically, goes off, what? And they, man, I'm glad I don't have to go to church anymore. I'm glad I don't have to go to Sunday school anymore. Glad I don't have to do that anymore, and they go buck wild and go do whatever. Well, we saw that statistic flip-flop. So it was every single year, not because of me. It was the Lord for sure and the method. And we just saw it. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'll never do something different. If there's a church that wants to hire me to do something different, I'll pass. Yeah. I'll work at Home Depot. I mean, I'm not, because I just have seen the fruit. I've just seen the fruit, and I've been so fortunate. And that's why I'm willing to go get sick and go sleep on the floor and be stressed out and exhausted and all that stuff, because you just see the fruit. It's just amazing. And I've seen long-term fruit. When Jesus says fruit that remains, like, I've been fortunate enough. Now I see people who are in their 30s who we could take back to those earlier days.
Yeah.
And I just go, wow. Like, look at the Lord, how he did that. You know? So,
as you were talking earlier, I was thinking the target is actually kind of secondary, like the Colonia and the hospitals. That's like a secondary mission field. Your mission field is actually the youth ministry. Yeah. Is that team of kids that you took, and your method is evangelizing in the worst neighborhood. So I can't remember, we were very, our youth ministry, I guess, before you came, was very teaching heavy. And when you came, I think there was a little bit of like, whoa, man, trepidation. He's like, he's got him out in the park every Wednesday sharing the gospel and all that stuff. And then we met, and I was probably that same way too, because I was just used to this, a teaching heavy ministry. And then you came, and what changed for me was meeting the couple of guys at Shepherd's Conference that grew up in your youth ministry. I'm thinking, man, these guys are both in ministry and they both adore you. I'm like, there's a method here. There's a method to your madness. So that's good. This is a good recap, and I just think it's helpful for, if you're looking. I mean, if you're not part of our church and you're looking for ministry opportunities, missions opportunities, maybe you guys could. I mean, parting words. What should they be looking for in a missions opportunity?
Well, Scott, you're on the missions board and you're leading a team to Nepal. What do you think?
Well, I think number one, you've got to have a love for the gospel, and a love for seeing the gospel proclaimed, not just, in our community, but, throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And, and a love for those that dedicate their lives, to go to hard places. We have the Moses family that has gone to Sierra Leone, a third world country that Murray took a team to last year, and very difficult place to minister. We're going to Nepal in November of this year. We've already assembled most of our team for that group. It'll be a small team. We can't take more than 10 people. But identifying people that really have a passion, for the spread of the gospel and the discipling of believers and planting churches, and that is a primary focus of our mission board philosophy is church planting and training church planters and coming behind the local church, because that's how God builds his church, is through the local church. And so even when, the mission trips that Murray's taken kids on, for the most part, in Mexico, we're connected with a church that we've helped plant, and then of course the Moseses are all about coming beside church planters and seeing the gospel spread through the establishment of churches, and so there just has to be that love and that dedication to that. And if you have a passion for that, come join our mission board. Most of the people going on our trip to Nepal are people that are on our mission board because they already have a passion for missions. And so I targeted them first, in terms of people that would have interest on going on this trip, because I knew they already have a passion for missions. Otherwise, they would not have joined the mission board. Yeah. And so, our mission board is open to members. If you want to come join our board, come talk to us, and it's a great way to serve, and then to be able to go on the mission field with some of the missionaries that we support. It's a tremendous opportunity to see the gospel and how it is being spread into these very needy places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
All right,
that's good.
Well, thanks, guys. This is one of our longer episodes, which is what people want. They tell us they want longer.
They want more.
They want longer content.
Want more.
So appreciate your accommodating them for that. And if you're listening, we're thankful that you listen to our podcast. We don't ask this, but if you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Music, would you it would help us, I think, get the podcast out beyond our walls if you would subscribe, if you would like it and comment and all that good stuff. And I think it helps other people find us. So we would appreciate that support, and be glad if you did that. So Murray, would you close our time in prayer?
Yep. Lord, grateful for your redemptive work that is still happening today, that you're not done, that when you're done, you'll come back, Lord. So you haven't come back, and so you're still working your redemptive plan, and you use trips like these to spread your gospel. Thankful for that. Pray for those, even as Scott was saying, those who have a passion, but there's many people who are intrigued, but they're afraid. So I pray that they would not let their fear rule them, that they would put their fear aside and they would step forward with faith and trust to say, you know what, I'm going to do it. Even though I'm afraid, it's the unknown, but I'm going to do it. I believe it would be an amazing experience that would transform me and give me an opportunity to spread the gospel to the nation. So Lord, we just pray for our church, that this would not be discouraging for what they heard today, but it would be encouraging, convicting where it needs to be convicting, Lord. So just thankful for this time, thankful for this church, and thankful for that trip that you allowed us to participate in. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for listening to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. We want to be a resource for you and answer the biblical, theological, or pastoral questions that you may have. Send them to us via email at questions@kerrvillebiblechurch.org, or leave us a text or voicemail at 830-321-0349.